with simultaneous consideration of number 41 and number 40. 40 and 41, as in the public notice. 373 Manning Avenue and 375 Manning, we'll deal with them together.
Where's that here?
So, let us ask the agent to join us, please, by stating your name.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. The name is David Bronskill, Bronskill, and the address, such as it is right now, is 333 Bay Street, Suite 3400, here as agent on behalf of both the owners and applicants, sir.
Very good. Okay, then, if you would, please. You have 5 minutes to present your application to the panel. Please carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am going to ask, and I hope that the committee, although considering them together, will issue two decisions in respect of these matters. And that's in part, Mr. Chair, because I'm going to make a comment just at the end of the presentation on some subtle revisions, I hope, to the proposed condition from housing staff at the city, which my client accepts, both of them. But I just need to divide them up between the properties, and I'll speak to that just in a moment, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
In general, you will recall the committee that this was in front of you previously, and there was a recommended deferral for both of them at separate opportunities from heritage staff. I think I had suggested to you at the time that if you looked at the dwellings, I didn't believe that there would be any heritage value. And I am saying this with a smile, Mr. Chair, not to pat myself on the back, but heritage staff have come back and confirmed that they are not recommending listing or designation of either of the properties. The time, sir, was well spent because there was an on-site visit with housing staff, which was appreciated, to confirm the nature of the existing rental units in both of the properties that are here with separate applications. 3 dwelling units as part of 373 Manning, Mr. Chair. 2 dwelling units and 2 dwelling rooms, technically as part of the second application, 375 Manning. The proposal, as you can see on the screen, there's an existing semi-detached dwelling with a garage at the rear on the lane. If I could ask housing committee staff to move to the next slide, thank you. There's a site plan for 373. You can see that essentially through the new construction, a rectangular box is deployed on the site, but the rear wall is no further into the rear than existing, and the front wall is in line with where the existing front wall occurs today. This plan we prepared, Mr. Chair, because we did feel we needed to explain the soft landscaping variance. We have done our best with the architect to maximize the extent of soft landscaping between the rear wall and the 2-story laneway suite. We cannot count any of the components that are related to access or fire access, and that includes the areas in yellow that get to the rear because those are required. And so we've done what we can to maximize the soft landscaping space. We've also indicated the green roof that will be on the 2-story laneway suite at the rear. I can go through all of the variances if you'd like, Mr. Chair, but maybe ask questions if you've got particular concerns with respect to any of them. You can see at the rear bicycle parking and access to the laneway suite off the lane on private property. So it's not impeding the lane that is under public ownership today. If I could ask committee staff to go to the next slide, please, and thank you. You can see the design is a semi-detached design, a different roof line, but again, an attempt to have the same type of slant approach to the front of the house as exists there today. And again, if I could ask the committee for the last slide from staff, thank you. And then it just gives the committee a section. As you can see, 3 rental units generously sized being produced in what will be a triplex, and a 2-bedroom, 2-story laneway suite at the rear. largely, I can say, in conformity with the city's laneway suite bylaw. But it's a 2 bedrooms, 2-story suite at the rear. So in the end, 4 rental housing suites ranging in sizes from about 1,100 square feet to about, let's say 2,000 or 2,100 square feet. So well-sized and also able to accommodate families through both the 2-bedroom at the rear, or some of the 1-bedrooms might be able to be double occupied. So, for example, the ground floor unit also has use of the basement. Mr. Chair, I was very quickly just going to deal with the housing condition. The only tweak, Mr. Chair and committee, that we would ask to the condition is that it references both properties. And we would ask each of your decisions to be in respect of the individual municipal properties. And so the only change, as it is for 373, would be, instead of saying 5 rental dwelling units and 2 dwelling rooms, it would say that the tenant relocation assistance plan be provided to all existing tenants of the 3 rental dwelling units proposed to be demolished at 373 Manning. And in proposed condition 2, the agreement under 45-9 would be registered only on title to 373 Manning. Similarly, and I can speak to it now, Mr. Chair, it would be 2 dwelling units and 2 dwelling rooms at 375 Manning. And condition 2 would require the agreement for 375 Manning, obviously, only to be registered against 375 Manning. But otherwise, our client, through discussions with housing staff, are fully accepting of the proposed condition to ensure that there is an appropriate tenant relocation assistance plan for all existing tenants in both of the properties that are the subject of these 2 applications. I hope that assists the committee. I am available, of course, to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Very good. Okay. Well, then, let's,
Mr. Chair, I wonder if I could, before we go to the speakers,
Yes.
there is, I wouldn't mind a couple of questions if I could. I don't
Go
want to
ahead. Go
belabor
ahead.
this. But, 3 questions, Mr. Ponsko. Thanks for the update. First is, can you just unpack that last housing amended recommendation for us a little bit? I'm assuming that it's because that is the existing state of tenancy in each of those buildings, but maybe you can confirm that. Secondly, I recall this when it was here before. I know that it was deferred for reasons, but could you confirm whether there are any changes to the variances from the time it was before us passed? And third is more of a technical one. I was just looking at the FSI increase for the main dwelling. It looks like a lot, and I was wondering if you could confirm what the current FSI of that building is. I'm sure it's more than 0.6. So 3 questions, if I might.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the questions. Yes, I can confirm that the site visit with housing staff identified the mix of dwelling units and dwelling rooms that are on the 2 properties. The reason I'm asking for the condition to be divided up, in addition to the fact that there are 2 separate applications before you that will require 2 separate decisions, is that they are 2 properties. They are separately owned. They have separate applications, and so to implement the condition as drafted as a whole for both properties could I don't know that it would, but it could present difficulties if I'm registering an agreement against 373, for example, that secures an obligation against 375. So that's the reason for asking it to be divided up, but it does reflect the unit mix and through you, Mr. Chair, it does reflect what housing staff observed and what housing staff have recommended in substance. That is, what they've recommended for each of the units, the 2 clients are agreeing to. We're just ensuring that they're appropriately allocated over to the each of the respective units. In terms of changes, I can advise from the last time that the landscaping at the rear has been eliminated. as a variance. There's still, you'll see on the notice variance, I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right one through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, you will see there's still a variance for the front yard landscaping because the front yard is frankly so small and it's where the stairs are located. But the client did work to maximize the soft landscaping at the rear and eliminate that variance that was previously before you. And so there's been extensive efforts to do that. So that change has occurred. And I should have anticipated this question. I am just looking in my notes through you, Mr. Chair, for the existing. It is obviously over the allowable 0.6 FSI, and I'm just going to find the number. It may just give me a minute, and I will find it. Perhaps what I could do, Mr. Chair, is just find that number for Mr. Clay for after the speakers have come. I'm just not pulling it up on the plans in my notes, but I will get it. I do have it. Apologies.
That's fine with me, Chair.
That's a good way forward. Let's do that, and we'll move on to the speakers now. Okay. Moderator.
Helen Gadaris, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead.
Oh, hi.
Oh, Helen, Helen, we're getting a
can you
lot
hear
of
me?
feedback from you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, I'm a tenant at 373 Manning, and I have two other tenants here who had registered to speak, but they didn't get the link. If that's okay, if they can be included as well? Hello?
Hello, Helen? Helen?
Helen, you keep muting yourself. There.
Can you hear me?
Okay, I hear you now. I didn't hear you a moment ago.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello? Yes?
Yes, we can.
So, did you hear I have two other tenants with me who had registered to speak but didn't get the link to the meeting?
Names, please.
Would it be okay if they're included afterwards?
I need to know their names. I need to be able to verify whether or not they are pre-registered.
Hello?
I beg your pardon. My fault. I was muted there, so Helen, my fault.
Oh, hi.
All this confusion has been created by me. I was muted. Okay, Helen. Here's the thing. I want to know the names of those two other people to see
Sure.
if they're. Could you give
Sure.
me-
One of them is Jane Fares, and the other one is Noelle Merritt.
I am sorry, but they do not show on my list of pre-registered speakers. I have quite a list of 5 pre-registered speakers, but their names don't show.
Oh, maybe they made a mistake then. Would it be okay if they spoke, or?
First of all, I have to. We will. No, I'm going to say no because we have 5 registered speakers to go through who have.
Sure, let me just launch into what I want to say.
Please.
In addition to the comments in my letter of objection that I had submitted, I just wanted to state that the proposed changes in this application I feel are not minor changes and they don't pass the 4 tests. This development application won't just affect these 2 houses in question before the committee today, which contains 7 units with 12 tenants, but we believe it's going to set a precedent for the remaining properties on Manning and College owned by the developer, which is the Solick family. In total, I believe there's 30 units that will ultimately be affected, which is a major chunk of this block. Firstly, I don't think that this variance is minor because it has a major impact on the lives of all of these tenants. I've lived here personally for 10 years, but there are tenants who have lived here for 40 years, like Jane. If this application goes through, we're worried that we won't have the opportunity to live in the neighborhood at the same price point. Most of us will be priced out. And I know that Councillor Layton wrote a letter concerning asking for the evaluation of the application, and Para has also written one, so we hope that everything will be considered. Next, I don't think that the change meets the general intent of the official plan. The new use is not going to be similar to the existing use because it will result in much more expensive housing rather than maintaining the affordable housing that we have right now. There's a 2018 Star article I came across where the development company involved in these applications, in their own words, say they cater to a well-to-do financially clientele. Affordable rental units that previously provided housing in this complex have been already vacated by the developer and left empty. So I believe that the existing use of the properties will change in the proposal in that it's taking away affordable housing. Next, I don't think that the change meets the general intent of the zoning bylaw or the city's official plan to increase the amount of housing. I don't think that all of this plan needs to be approved. For example, the laneway suites could easily be constructed without tearing down our current houses. That way, the units will add tenants without decreasing the affordable units that we already live in. And lastly, in terms of the softscaping concerns that other neighbors had brought up, I've personally planted and tended trees and native plants and pollinators, and that softscaping in these plans would be lost. So I guess I'm asking the committee to deny this application based on the major impact it will have on tenants, as well as the many concerns and letters of objection from others in this neighborhood.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for speaker panel? Hearing none, we shall move to the next speaker who is pre-registered.
Susan Lum, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead.
Hello?
Hi. Hi. Can you hear me?
I do hear you, Susan, yes.
You can. Okay, great.
So
Okay.
please state your name, and
Susan.
then you have 5 minutes to present your concerns to the panel.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. My name is Susan Lum. I didn't see my letter on the thing, so I'll just read my letter because it states all my things. Dear committee members, I have lived at 375 Manning Avenue for nearly 20 years. I'm a visual artist, and this is also my studio where I work from. There's no affordable housing left in Toronto to move to, let alone live-work accommodations. I'm 48 and have lived my entire life in Toronto. Scale developments, the Salix, are looking to displace me and my neighbors right out of the city where all of my clients and friends live for profit. This house is and has always been owned and managed by one company. Prior to the Salix scale development, it was owned by the Jose's. In these two attached houses alone, there are 7 units. By the way, the one in the basement that he was calling a room. Sorry, that's the craziness here. Anyway, housing is actually like another full unit, not just a room. So there's 3 full apartments in this house, not 2. Sorry, that is the plumbing, by the way. Housing 12 humans. The 2 houses to the north of us, also owned by the Salix and previously the Jose's, have 6 units. The remaining 17 residential units belonging to the complex, owned currently by the Salix and previously by the Jose's, can be found at 548, 550, 552, 554, and 556 College Street. There has always been one property manager for the entire complex, including 5 additional retail units. I don't know how many residents are left because as people leave, they refuse to rent the units to new people, which should be illegal during a housing crisis. We are all close here and have become family. I am very worried about where we are all going to live. Scale development builds luxury units for the rich. This is not about adding affordable housing to the neighborhood. I have no idea where I will be able to live and work, and it's very stressful. Basically, part of this letter speaks to the fact that this is not just a house or 2, it's a rental complex owned by one family, the Salick family. So what happens here is a precedent for the rest of the tenants. There's also a lot of soft spacing, which will be demolished. I've also tended trees and bushes and things for the wildlife. So I think that's what I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your input. Panel members, any questions of the speaker? I have a question for you.
Yes.
So if you could tell me, as I hear your concern and that of the person before you, the concern is that these units will be, that the new units will be beyond your ability to afford. So what have you been told in that regard by the by the owners of the properties? Have they said you'll be able to come back, or what have they said?
So basically, since we moved in, they actually haven't even introduced themselves to us. I've never met them. I had to find out their names by like doing internet research myself. They don't tell us anything or fix anything. They don't fix anything. Like my apartment is so broken. I think they literally just want me to like leave because my apartment's broken.
At this point, have you received any, notifications from them by way of having to
Nothing.
move?
Nothing. There's no communication at all regarding this at all. Nothing.
Okay. All right then, thank you very much.
And
Let's-
when I ask Mark, the property manager, he won't tell us anything.
You've asked him and he has no comment, okay.
No. And then when I ask him to fix the things that are wrong, he laughs at me. Like he just like they don't care about us. Like it's not like they're doing something for humanity. They don't care about humans.
Okay.
He just comes to collect the money, and when I ask for him to do things, he ignores me until it's rent day and then comes and gets the money.
I get it. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to the next speaker now.
Yep.
Ask them to join us.
Fernanda Pisani, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead.
Okay, did I do good?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
We do hear you. Please state your name.
Okay, my name is Fernanda Pisani. I live on Euclid Avenue at 432.
Go ahead and address your concerns to the committee.
My concern to the committee was submitted in the earlier hearing, and it was in regards to the overall scale and size of the development, which seems to be out of proportion to the rest of the cityscape on that street. But my biggest concern is the impact on soft landscaping, because already there's so little soft landscaping, especially in front of the properties. And their plans is to get rid of it completely, which I don't think is necessary. I'm sure that they could make soft landscaping available within their proposal. The problems with the depletion of soft landscaping, in this case to absolutely nothing, is that it's not a good thing to do in our climate change, with our climate change problems, with our drainage problems. Most of the properties in this neighborhood that have paved over, their yards usually have the most ice in front of their properties and cause problems with drainage along the gutters. Now, there's also the problem at the back where they have the bikes. They intend to create parking spaces for the bicycles. If you go up Allen Reynolds Lane and you turn, the turn is incredibly tight. And my concern is that where they plan to insert the bicycle parking spaces will be a hindrance, because it's not just small cars that go through. I mean, there are all kinds of vehicles that have to go through that laneway in various sizes. So that to me is something that needs to be discussed and possibly changed so that the hindrance is no longer there. And that is basically my two biggest concerns with this project. I concur with the tenants in regards to housing, but that's been covered already.
Thank you very much. Questions here at panel for the speaker? Are there any? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next pre-registered speaker.
David Pulley-Blank. David Pulley-Blank, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead.
Hello, thank you. My name is David Pulley-Blank. I live at 408 Euclid, which is across the Allen Reynolds Laneway, and I have some concerns about this development. First of all, I'd like to basically raise some technical issues. The applications themselves, when you read them, were internal renovations to convert an existing duplex into a triplex building. There was no indication that they would be demolishing an existing structure, nor was there any indication that they were going to build a laneway house. So this is the kind of indirection that we're having to deal with. When look at the actual application forms, there is a clear error in the application for 375 Manning, where they have misrepresented the actual area of the lot. You can calculate it yourself. It's with 83.9, not 303.5, which is what they state on their application form. So there are big issues with the way in which the applications were done, and the consequence is that we now have separate consideration of the two properties, even though they are really the properties of the same company, and the plans that have been developed are mirror images of each other, and therefore should be subject to the same required variances, which we find that when we look at the list of variances that are being asked for, there are 2 additional variances being asked for 375, which are not there in the list for 373. And these are rather critical variances, and I believe that if they are not provided for 373, the structure cannot legally be built. First of all, variance 2 on 375. Chapter 150, 8, 60, 20. The minimum required rear yard setback for an ancillary structure containing a laneway suite is 1.5 meters. The laneway suite will be located 1.14 meters from the rear east lot line. Now, this is the one that's going to involve basically an invasion of the laneway, and it's the issue that Fernando raised a moment ago about the tight turn in that corner of the lane. Putting bicycle parking in the setback is going to further invade the laneway beyond that for the actual structure. I know that they need to have bicycle parking because that's the requirement built into the bylaw for the laneway house, but it's just not going to work there because it's going to get hit by a vehicle sooner or later. So it is just not a technically practical place to put it. The other big issue is the variance number 4, also for 375. The maximum permitting dwelling depth for a triplex is 14 meters. Semi-detached triplex will have a depth of 17.56 meters. This means that the structure will invade the basically you have a tiny backyard at the back. This creates a very serious fire issue because the proposed third floor unit, or second and third floor unit, has only one exit in the rear, and that is at the third floor level, which will be a balcony. Somebody will have to be able to get a ladder in because the internal exit downstairs may easily be blocked by fire. Getting a ladder into a tiny backyard, setting it up 27 feet long in order to reach that balcony will basically be a very, very serious issue. And I don't think that that even entered the minds of the people who were basically designing this thing. This thing is a monster. It's going to be way too big for the lot that is going to be built on. The other issue is at the front of the house, they're basically taking away all the soft landscaping in order to insert a stairwell. The purpose of that stairwell is really suspect. It suggests that, in fact, they're intending eventually to have an additional basement unit, which they are not declaring at this point. So that is just the question that we have in front of us.
I'll ask you now to make your final comments, please.
Okay, well, basically, I think that these development is too big for the lot, and there are numerous issues, both with respect to invasion of the neighborhood, with respect to parking, and with both and with precedent. So I think that the process in which they've proceeded is not good, and they should be told to go back and start over.
Thank you very much. Panel members, any questions for the speaker? Okay, then. I think we're moving now, moderator, to the final speaker registered.
Fermi Diamond, you've been
Hello?
you can go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay.
You're with the panel now. Just state your name, please.
I'm Fremi Diamond, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Palmerston Area Residents Association, and in particular, our Green Committee and the Paraplanning Working Group. And we are registering our objections to this application because of the softscaping deficits on both sites, in particular in the front yards, which the minimum landscaping is now being declared to be 0% of both those houses. We feel that these are not minor variances, and in particular, we are requesting revisions to be proposed to the proposed plans to include the minimum 75%. And I understand that there are staircases that need to be put in. That's fine to have a small variance. I have a basement apartment in my house, and we don't have, and we have adequate softscaping in our front yard. So the front yard softscaping plans in this application, if permitted, it would set a precedent that would adversely affect our neighborhood in general. And while many of our residents in this community, we're all in favor of increased density and multi-unit housing and also affordable housing, the community is also committed to maintaining and increasing our green spaces, which is at quite a deficit in our neighborhood. And this is as in our Para Green Plan of 2020, and that was approved as an official city document. So the request to reduce the front yard landscaping, plus the variances requested for reducing the softscaping in the backyard, I understand some of that has been brought back in, must also be seen in the context of the increased floor space index of the proposal. So increasing this floor space index without increasing the softscaping goes against the zoning bylaws. Now, the deficits in the softscaping, and this is even with the green roof, does not only fall radically short of the neighborhood needs of the City of Toronto zoning bylaws, it also contradicts the City of Toronto's target for building resilience to climate change. This is not a trivial issue. Softscaping of front yards is critical to climate change mitigation and the maintenance of the livability of our neighborhood and thus the city as a whole. Therefore, the lack of a front yard severely impinges on the public realm and livability of the neighborhood. It is critical to the softscaping is critical to addressing the urban heat island effect, a growing concern because of our city's increasingly frequent heat waves in the summer and their sequelae. As well, softscaping contributes to mitigating stormwater runoff, another really great issue for the city. Softscaping and trees contribute visually and aesthetically to the streetscape and to the well-being and mental health of residents and visitors. People are not just robots who live in boxes, but our environment is crucial to our well-being as well. If Toronto is to maintain its high ranking as a livable city, and the environment is one of the indicators, then we must protect areas that contribute to and abut the public realm. To date, the application has not addressed Urban Forestry's request to seek permits to injure or remove tree in one of the properties. And Mayor John Tory has recently confirmed the city's commitment that we need to increase 40% of our tree canopy. And our neighborhood is in deficit of 20%, and especially since older trees are being cut down. So we need to, this is really crucial. It's not just minor. We've been informed that a green roof is going to be added to the design of both proposals, and we applaud this. We're really pleased. However, adding green roofs does not compensate for the loss of the front yard softscaping. On the contrary, a major renovation or demolition such as this proposed should be seen as an opportunity to rectify softscaping deficits and, if possible, to protect or plant trees. In conclusion, we would like to this landscaping deficit to be rectified, and we also support the tenants that in that affordable housing is being torn down to make room for higher end apartments, and this does not address Toronto's housing crisis, but makes it worse. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Panel, any questions of the speaker? Okay then. Now that concludes the input from registered speakers in opposition that had pre-registered. So we'll now go back to the agent, and the agent will have an opportunity to respond to what has been said in rebuttal. So we're back now to Mr. Bronskill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to start just with the soft landscaping. And again, the variance for the soft landscaping at the rear has been removed. And in response to comments from last time, in terms of sustainability, the green roof has been added. The variance that is now before the committee relates to the front yard, and it's a small area, as you can see on the plan in front of you, between the front wall and the property line. It would be about 7.5 square meters, or let's say 80 square feet. And it's where the staircase is, and it's where the fire access has to run next to the houses to get to the rear. One speaker had raised a concern about fire access, but it's been addressed in the zoning review and in terms of advisory notes about having an unobstructed 1 meter wide measure to the property line, 2.1 meter vertical clearance path of travel for fighters access to the laneway houses principal entrance. All of this has been provided, including access for pumper vehicles, because they won't use the laneway. So that's been addressed through the application. But the front yard it's about 80 square feet or so, where the staircase is down to the basement, to allow easier access for that unit that's both the ground floor and the basement to be able to come and take, for example, a bike and take it downstairs. If I could ask the indulgence of committee staff just to go to the first page of our presentation package. Some of the confusion may lie from the fact that today there is significant hardscaping in front, but the property line is shown there in dashed red. So the area that's hardscaped today is city-owned property that does not count one way or the other for your front yard landscaping requirement. Now, our client for 373 and our client for 375 is prepared to work with the city to landscape those areas, and many people do on the street. But greening those areas doesn't rectify what I submit as the technical variance for the loss of about 80 square feet behind the red line, where the staircase will be located, and to the main wall of the new triplexes. So I hope that helps explain the front yard soft landscaping variance that remains before you. In terms of laneway access, I'm just very briefly going to repeat what I said earlier in my comments to you. The laneway is going to remain a public laneway. And there is 1.5 for one of the laneway suites, which is in compliance with the zoning bylaw, 1.14 for the other, which is not and requires a variance, but reflects basically where the existing structure is, and bike parking provided in accordance with laneway suite housing requirements on private property. So the public laneway is not being impeded in any way, shape, or form. And then I just wanted to quickly again deal with housing requirements. Part of the deferral has enabled the site visit and discussions with City of Toronto housing staff. I know that this committee knows that the question of whether a permit is required under Chapter 667 of the Municipal Code is not for this committee to decide. And I saw the letter from the councillor suggesting that that review be undertaken. That review has been undertaken. City housing staff are the ones who undertake that review. And they are here recommending a condition for an appropriate tenant relocation and mitigation plan for the 3 dwelling units in the one building and the 2 dwelling units and 2 dwelling rooms in the other building. That's a condition that my client has accepted. I will say to this committee, it's unclear whether that condition can be required absent a permit under Chapter 667, but it's a reasonable condition from housing staff and one that my clients have both accepted. And it's one this committee can and should impose, because it will provide additional compensation and moving expenses for tenants who will unfortunately be relocated as part of the demolition and new construction. But the question as to whether a Chapter 667 permit is required has been answered, In any event, it's not something, unfortunately, within this committee's jurisdiction. I think that addresses the concerns raised, but Mr. Chair, as always, I am happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you for that. And there are some.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I apologize for interrupting. I forgot Mr. Clay's question before, and I've got approximate answers. I apologize for interrupting. We don't have exact numbers. These would exclude the basement. As you know now, the basement is counted for these GFA numbers that are before you now to get to the FSIs being permitted. So the GFA is in. The numbers we have without basement are roughly 0.62 and 0.65 based on about 2,000 square feet on the first and second floors of the existing structures. So the additional GFA comes in rounding off into a rectangle, the existing footprint, the addition of the third floor, which allows the two-story units on the second and third floors, and counting the basement, which, as you know, is not always counted when it comes to looking at FSIs. And I apologize, Mr. Chair, for forgetting that.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's go to the questions. Mr. Nipfel, you go first. I think Mr. Clay wanted to go second.
Yes, Mr. Bronskill, I think there's much about the design and configuration of the buildings that's really quite commendable. But the one question that keeps coming up, and as you related, is this landscape deficiency. I appreciate your willingness to work with the city to landscape the paved public part of the front yard. I'm wondering, the one part of the building that I don't think is necessary and could change is that exit from the basement to the front yard. If that were to go to soft landscaping, what would that do to your variance for front yard landscaping? Any idea what percentage that would be?
Through you, I don't know for sure, through you, Mr. Chair, whether it would meet the 75%, but I do think it would come awfully close. We could not count the path that runs down, and then there's the platform leading up to the front stairs that would be there. I will try and see. I have the architect sort of available through another channel, Mr. Chair. I will see if I can get what that measurement might be by the time I've done answering the other questions.
I think that's actually a reasonable way to increase the front yard landscaping. And as you can see from the floor plans that the architect has created, there is another entrance at the back of the building, so it's not a fire issue. I just think it might be worth considering.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I will try and get that exact measurement.
Other questions for the agent, Mr. Byatt? Go ahead, please. You are mute. You're muted.
Thank you. I was quite moved by the various comments that were submitted by, I suppose some of them are the current tenants in the properties, particularly those, because the impact of relocation would be felt greatest by them. I haven't heard you respond in any way to some of their concerns. One of the concerns that fortuitous, surely something, if you're a tenant, your property manager would respond to problems that you have. So this is not part of the variances that you are requesting, but that also goes a long way in terms of suggesting that perhaps not enough consideration has been given to those tenants that are currently living in these properties. That does make me feel a little uncomfortable. I'm not sure if you have any responses to these or not, to the questions that the various tenants and individuals have raised. We've talked about the soft landscaping, yes, but I haven't heard anything in terms of the responses of the concerns of the tenants. Would you be able to elaborate?
I can, through you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, I don't have firsthand knowledge of interactions with the property manager, and so I'm not even going to try and refute those, sir. If that is the lived experience, that they've had many unsatisfactory encounters with the property manager, I don't have information to refute that, and I can only indicate that is regretful and offer my own personal apology. But I'm not directly involved in that, and I do apologize for not being able to give you a better answer. I can on the planning matters go back to the staff memo from housing staff and just I think maybe it's worth going through it in a little bit of detail, because these are all requirements that will go beyond anything that's in the Residential Tenancies Act, and they include not just the minimum financial compensation and notice under the RTA, but additional compensation that city staff will secure on behalf of the tenants based on each existing tenant's length of tenure and consistent with the city's current practices. And I've worked on a lot of these throughout the city on very complicated rezonings, and it does result in additional compensation. There's additional notice so that tenants can get have more time to get affairs in order. There's a moving allowance for each tenant. There's special needs compensation subject to certain criteria. And sir, I would also note in particular, if requested by tenants, what housing staff require now, and it's in one of the conditions, is the use of a rental leasing agent that would be at my client's cost to assist tenants in trying to identify and secure alternative rental accommodation within reasonable vicinity of the lands. So housing staff, frankly, have done their job here and have proposed a tenant relocation assistance plan that goes well beyond the Residential Tenancies Act. And both of the owners have accepted that recommended condition, even though there's no permit required under Chapter 667. So I can only address those planning aspects of it, sir. I'm sorry I don't have a better answer on the lived experience of the tenants.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, have you been able
If I may
to,
just ask a follow-up?
I beg your pardon?
May I just ask a quick follow-up?
Please do.
With the agent, please. Would the current tenants be aware, have they been provided the information with regard to all these resources that you mentioned?
Unfortunately, through you, Mr. Chair, probably not yet. This may be the first they're learning with them. Housing, and I don't mean this as a criticism, and I apologize if it comes across as a criticism. You'll note the memo was dated February 2nd. I did have some discussions directly with the city, including city legal, about getting all of this done so that we knew it could be secured. And the site visit was basically about a week ago. I wish the site visit had happened a number of months ago so that this memo might have been available sooner. But it is available now. And so, sir, I would say, having only been available for a week, it would be hot off the press in terms of perhaps news to the tenants. But I hope that they're now aware of that memo, and I've heard my summary of it and both owners' commitment, because it would be a condition of approval that they'll have to negotiate these things with housing staff who will be there to assist the tenants.
Thank you.
I appreciate the question. And sorry, Mr. Chair, if in the end, I'm going to give one of these classic lawyerly answers that, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Nipfel, if the preference would be to keep that front stair, but the commentary about there being another access at the rear is true, and if in the end the committee decided that stair should be removed and the 7.5 square meters of front yard landscaping should be provided. It's an alternative submission, but it's one that we would accept as part of this overall proposal to the committee. My thanks.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions for the agent? I'm going to ask the agent to stand by because we're going to go into committee now on this application, but we may have reason to come back out of committee to put questions to you that'll help us moving toward a decision. Mr. Nipfel, yes?
Yeah, just further to Mr. Bronskill's point, and thank you, Mr. Bronskill, for your answer. If if the stairway were to come out and be replaced with landscaping, what I wanted to know was what would that do to variance number 6? How would it read? Because it wouldn't be 0%. It would be a certain percentage, and it would be a certain square meters.
And Mr. Brownskill, you actually said that you had a back channel to the architect. Has that proven fruitful yet?
I don't have an exact number, but my understanding, I think, is that what we would be able to do in that instance, and I'm just going back to the variance so I get the phrasing of it correct, is that we've got to do 75% of the front yard as soft landscaping. I think the area where the stairs are located, taking away the pathway area,
Yeah.
would, and then leaving room for the porch access, I believe would be enough to be able to provide the 75%.
So in fact, you wouldn't need the variance.
I think that rather than guessing at a number, that's my recommendation through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very
Your
much.
recommendation
Just
is
for
what, too?
clarification, would that be for both properties, or it would be same for both properties?
I think through you, Mr. Chair, to you, Mr. Clay, yes, I think that would be the approach to both properties. And I'm just, in a classic stall, I just want to look at one thing on the plans. What we could also potentially do, I'm just zooming so that I can look at the plans. What we could also potentially do is, there is a porch space that could always be narrowed slightly as well, that if we need to make up a little bit more, if we're not quite at the 7.5 within the stair area, I think we've got a bit of room there to narrow up that porch area as to pick up a little bit more front yard landscaping. So and so yes, we would do it on both. I hear the question as applying to both, and yes.
That's terrific. Thank you very much.
Very good. Okay. Panel members, any further questions? I'm going to ask Mr. Bronskill to stand by so that as we're deliberating, we can come back to him if we need to. So let's then at this stage take the application into committee for some discussion and begin to move toward some kind of a motion on the application. So I'll ask someone to go ahead, please, with their comments on the two applications. Mr. Clay, go ahead.
Sure, I'm happy to start. I know my colleagues will also want to have their comments in and have a discussion. First of all, I want to tell all the people who have called in about this application, thank you for your comments. We do appreciate hearing from you, and we understand the concerns that you're raising. I am interested, I did note that many of the tenants, for example, may not have already heard about the compensation package. So they may be heartened a little bit by that, perhaps not. The only thing I would say to them, if we decide to move forward and approve this application, is that another course of action for them to pursue if they're dissatisfied with the tenant or the process, that they can, there's a path for them to go to the landlord-tenant board and raise those concerns. And if those concerns offend the Landlord-Tenant Act, then there will be a way forward to get those resolved. I think Carl's suggestion about removing the front basement walkout is an excellent one. I did notice that they did have access to the basement from the rear, either for a rental unit or for maintenance, for utilities and such. I think that should be satisfactory. I like this proposal. I think that the design is good. I think that the massing is good. It's not that far of a departure from what currently exists. I'm particularly pleased to see, as we always are, proposals for laneway suites, which only have minor variances, and in this case, it's just a minor setback for one of the laneway suites, which is commendable. There's no height variance or 45-degree angle variance. So that's all good and in keeping with what we're trying to achieve here. The one thing I would put out there as maybe an additional concern to individuals concerned about soft landscaping, there is the vast majority of that front yard is city-owned property as part of the right-of-way. And I was encouraged to hear Mr. Bronskill suggest that they would negotiate with the city about turning that into soft landscaping as well, which should be a very doable and very easy thing to do, whether it be sod or plantings or permeable pavers or whatever. It just seems to me that if we do proceed for an approval, that I'd like to introduce a condition that process be formalized to, and I think, again, these neighborhoods, the majority of the front yard isn't private property, and I think people are sometimes confused by that. So I guess in summary, I understand all the concerns, but I think with the conditions that planning and housing have been posed, and the proposal as brought before us, I think, in my view, it's supportable.
Thank you.
With Carl's suggestion.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll weigh in very briefly. I'm also enheartened by Mr. Bronskill's willingness to suggest that the public portion of the front yard be renegotiated as soft landscaping with the city. I think that's a very positive point. I think the removal of the front stairway to the basement and replacement with landscaping, which, as I understand it, would result in the elimination of variance number 6, is also positive. There's also a green roof on the laneway suite, which is going to help with the city's environmental conditions. Like Mr. Clay, I think that the buildings they're really quite handsome. They're a modern reinterpretation of historical style, and they've been done with great sophistication and care, and I commend that aspect of the application. So, subject to the various conditions that we've been discussing, I also think this application is very supportable.
Thank you. Mr. Bide, any comment?
I'm still a bit disturbed by, I suppose, the various comments that I heard from the existing tenants.
Yes.
I do appreciate Mr. Clay's message to the folks who hopefully are listening, so that they took full advantage of the options available to them in terms of going to the landlord-tenant board, and of course looking at all the options they have in terms of supports and financial assistance. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, I agree with both my colleagues that the project itself is something that can be supported. But, at the back of my mind, I keep thinking that we live in a city in which increasingly people have nowhere to go, nowhere affordable to go. And I am also aware that there is a pretty strong move by property owners to develop and maximize the returns. There is something called the commercialization of housing that I find quite distasteful, and we see it not only in Toronto but in other cities around the world, which puts people out of house and home. Having said all of that, I think this is an application that I think I would rather abstain from.
Your intention is to abstain from voting?
Yes.
Fine. I think that's okay, is it not? It's a, you may, if you wish, vote against it, rather than abstain.
I will do that.
Pardon me?
Yes, I will vote against.
I think that's preferable because yes, I prefer that.
Certainly.
Yeah, okay. So, for my point, I was heartened to hear about this housing assistance that would be offered in terms of kind of legal framework for various benefits to the displaced tenants, because I too listened to those tenants and understood immediately what their concern was going to be. With respect to the application itself, but I was heartened by the availability of this assistance from housing. With respect to the application itself and its technicalities, my first reaction to the thought of removing the front basement entrance to the basement suite was I do like soft landscaping, but forever and ever we're going to have a basement suite that can only be entered by the rear. And I thought about that and thought about walking down the side of the property to get into the basement suite. But then it occurred to me that with the laneway suites, that rear yard will be much transited, and so perhaps that's not as big a deal as I thought it was in terms of not having a front entrance to the basement suite. Could probably work, and it would help on the soft landscaping at the front. I'm still, if we are moving toward approval motions, and although we're dealing with the two applications together, I thought that the applicant's request to have separate decisions was legitimate. I think one of the owners of record of the two properties are not the same. One is owned by one member of the Salick family, another is owned by another member. So they're not the same owners. I think it's probably a good idea to do two separate decisions. And there was detail offered by the agent with respect to the two units. You know, he said with respect to 373, I'd ask that there be reference to 3 units, and with 375 to 2 units plus. And I have to go back to if we're thinking about doing that, we need to go back to the agent to recapture what exactly he was proposing there as far as that is concerned. But overall, with the housing condition in place, I'd be able to support. Mr. Nipfel, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if I might just ask for a point of clarification. I don't believe there is a basement suite.
There's no basement suite?
There are 3. I don't believe so. I think there are 3 suites in each building. The basement and the first floor is 1 suite, and the second floor and the third floor are 2 suites. So the basement is an adjunct to the main floor of the building.
Mr. Nipfel, if that's the case, and thank you for pointing it out. So now that I understand that's the case, then my concerns about removing that front entrance are assuaged. Yes.
Perhaps Mr. Bronskill can just confirm, but that's what the plans indicate, and I understood what Mr. Bronskill's presentation suggested as well. There's 3 units per building.
I get it. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, then. Are we ready to move toward 2 motions with respect to the 2 applications? Or at least my suggestion would be that we do two motions and vote on them one after the other.
Well, I'm happy to do one and Carl can do the other. How's that?
Sounds good to me. Go ahead.
Carl's will be better than mine, I can
I don't
guarantee
think
you.
so.
I'll start on to 373, Manny. I'm going to move approval of this application. And I guess there are a series of conditions. There are the standard engineering conditions. There is, although I don't see, is there anything on file from engineering for the laneway suite for the numbering?
Through you, Mr. Chair, those comments are in the deferred package.
There you go.
So there are engineering comments.
Right.
Conditions.
So I'll move approval of this application subject to the engineering conditions and subject to the conditions laid out in is it planning staff or housing staff? On this one. It says
I think
planning
it's
staff
strategic
report.
planning.
Yeah, I thought I heard Mr. Bronsko refer to it as housing staff, but it's actually from planning. So this is the conditions laid out in the February 2nd, 2022 memo from planning staff. Is there any others? Is there forestry conditions?
Yeah, forestry number 3.
Thank you, Carl. Forestry number 3.
And how do we
And
deal
I
with
think
how do you propose to deal with the front entrance?
Yeah, I was just getting that. I just wanted to get through the regular conditions first. Heritage has signed off on this. I don't believe they have any further concerns. And then with respect to the front yard landscaping, the condition, I guess we make it a condition, or actually we remove variance number, is it 1?
6. I think it's 6.
We remove variance number 6 or refuse variance number 6 or remove it. I'm not sure what the appropriate procedure would
We
be.
refuse variance number 6.
Okay. Therefore, that will become soft landscaping, or they'll meet the requirements for front yard landscaping. And I'd also like to attach a condition that follows up on the owner's agreement to work with city staff about making the remainder of the city-owned portion of the property in some sort of soft landscaping / permeable material. I think that covers everything. I'm sorry for staff for having to kind of weave your way through all that, but I think everything is covered there. Carl, you try and replicate that for the next one.
No, I think you should move the next one as well, because there's only one thing that changes.
Okay. All right, then let's just give staff a moment to capture all of this, and we'll proceed once they have done so.
I'm happy to second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, very good. We're just hanging on here while staff. So, Madam Deputy Treasurer, do you have what you need?
I think I have enough to work with.
Okay. In that case, Mr. Nipfel having seconded the motion, it is moved and seconded to approve the application. This is number 40 we are dealing with now, 373 Manning Ave. So all those in favor, show of hands, please. And those against. Let the record show that Mr. Byatt is in dissent on this application. With that, the motion is carried and the application is approved. And the panel now moves, we are still in committee, we now move on to number 41, 375 Manning Avenue. And a motion is still needed on this one to decide the matter. So, Mr. Nipfel, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move approval of this application, subject again to the development engineering conditions, the strategic planning conditions, forestry condition number 1, refusal of variance, in this case, variance number 8, and the wording that Larry suggested for the last item for negotiating with the city for landscaping the public boulevard.
Thank you very much. Let's just again sit tight for a moment. Mr. Clay, are you
I
seconding
was just
that?
going to second that.
That is being seconded by Mr. Clay, and I'm going to give staff a moment again just to catch up with this. Okay, now we're good. Okay, it is moved and seconded to approve the application. Those in favor, show of hands, please. Thank you. Those against. Let the record show that Mr. Byatt is in dissent on this application. It is therefore the case that the motion is carried with a vote of 3-1, and the application is thereby approved. Okay, thank you very much. We move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is number 42, which deals with 35 Admiral Road. On this application, the committee has before it copy of minutes October 6th, public hearing, copy of survey, revised site plan, floor plans, elevations, covering letter from the agent January 6th, covering letter from planning consultant February 2nd, permeable paver info package February 2nd received, and presentation materials from the agent February 2nd. There's correspondence from tree protection and plan review. And there are staff reports from community planning and also from urban forestry tree protection. The correspondence received is as follows. A 2-signature petition in support, signed by owner occupants 2727A Admiral Road. In opposition, there is correspondence from the Annex Residents Association, received February 2. And we'll now ask the agent to join us, please. Or actually, the planner, who's standing by to join us, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Good evening. Please state your name.
Yes, my name is Paul Johnston. I'm a land use planner, and I'm here on behalf of the owner applicants in this matter.
Very good. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to check with my colleagues on the panel to see if they'd like a presentation on this application. And I'm not hearing that. Panel members, do you have any questions to put directly to the planner?
Well, I think, Chair, the question, at least I was, I'm sure the agent has seen the recommendation from planning staff, so I just wondered if you could comment on that.
Yes, I can do that. Do you want an overview of the application as well, or should I just deal with
No,
the
just
planning comment?
if you could just respond to that question,
Will
which
do.
is comment on the report.
Sure. So the planning staff in their report speak to some official plan policies that they indicate are relevant in terms of the front yard parking issue and the front yard landscaping issue. And the report itself indicates issues around existing physical character of streetscapes, issues of landscaping improvements, prevailing patterns of landscape open space, and ensuring that development is compatible with the physical neighborhood character. In the visual material, which we submitted, and that is on page, we can bring up page 6 and page 7 from the visual material. That?
Yes, page 6, staff of the visual materials supplied. Just hang on a second, applicant, while we could bring that up.
Yeah, thank you.
Page, is this the correct page?
It will be one more. That's page, I have is page 6. It's a series of photographs. It may be one, there we go. So we've done a survey of the conditions on Admiral Road in the area of the application. There are some 56 properties. Fully 54% of those, or 30, have front yard parking in various configurations. Some are similar to the proposal. Others are somewhat different, but the prevailing pattern of the streetscape on Admiral Road, which is a function really of the size of the properties, the lack of laneway that might be available to the rear, and the requirements for modern parking arrangements, means that the existing condition which the official plan speaks to is one of a prevailing pattern of front yard parking pads. The situation at the subject site is that there, at some point prior to our clients acquiring the property, there was a parking pad located. We don't know when that was, but from the photographs of the front of the dwelling, you can see that there is a hardscape which is really next to the front stairs. So in terms of the planner's comment, then, the unique situation we have here is twofold. One, there's an existing character that this would be consistent with. Secondly, there has been a proposal made by the architect, as you've heard on earlier applications, for a permeable paver. We've made a submission to the committee on that to address issues around stormwater management and infiltration. And the final thing I'll say on this issue is that, and this goes also to the submissions from the Residents Association, there is a petition that's been filed with you from some 20 addresses on the street. Every one of those addresses is in support of this application. And as I understand it, one of the reasons for that is that the feeling of the residents on the street is that front yard parking not only is required, but also its presence really diminishes demand on the street and stops people from circling the neighborhood looking for parking spaces. So while I do understand the general objectives of what the planning department is speaking to, I think the circumstances here are unique, and the solution that has been put forward is a sensitive one and is one that is not going to have any adverse impact on the neighbors. I don't know of any immediate neighbor who has expressed that that will be the case. So those would be my comments on the planning department's issue with front yard parking.
Thank you very much. Further questions for the applicant? If any, Mr. Nipfel, go ahead.
If in fact the front yard parking space was not permitted or not approved, the planning department is suggesting, it's suggesting that the refusal of variances, I believe variances 3, 4, 5, can't remember whether it's 6 or not.
I believe 6 as well.
6 as well. If the parking space was taken off, would you comply with 75% of the required front yard landscaping? Would you comply with 50% of the front yard required landscaping, or would you be under? In other words, if the issue is parking, and the planning department's recommendation was carried, then you wouldn't get variance 3 or 4 as well. But so that would mean you'd have to meet the bylaw requirement for those two. And can you do that?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if we were to pull up page 7, the answer I'm going to give you is I don't know the answer. I don't know. But to give you a visual as to what we're dealing with, the area.
I realize that. I'm concerned that if the assumption is that if you don't get 3 and 4 approved, you'd have to comply with the bylaw, and I don't know if you can do that.
No, I don't believe
I
we
appreciate
would.
this. Okay, thank you.
I don't believe we would.
Okay. If there are no other questions, let's take the application into committee and look for a motion, please.
Well, Chair, oh, no, I won't.
Well, maybe while we're
Let
waiting
Larry,
for Mr.
Larry, so
Clay,
you
do
know,
want me
we
to
can
start?
hear you, but we've lost your video. But we do hear you.
There
You're back.
I am.
You're back.
I'm sorry, my internet, I think, is a little shaky here. It's late. I'm happy to start. In this case, I understand, a street has all kinds of parking pads on it. Those are historical. Those are ones that have been in place and been grandfathered. We do acknowledge, I think, that the city is very concerned about adding more parking pads for the reasons we all know about in terms of water runoff and such. And in this case, I'm inclined to agree with planning staff about the refusal for the variances for front yard parking, which would have a consequential impact on the variances required for soft landscaping. So I'm supportive of a motion that approves variances 1 and 2, but refuses variances 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I'm happy to move that motion
Why
if
don't you
no one
move
else
that
has
motion?
any.
Go ahead. And move.
I will move that very motion. Thank you.
Forestry 1 and 2 as well?
Does that relate to variances 3 to 6? I thought it did. Because it's the tree in the front, right?
Yeah, perhaps we don't have to put it in. You may be right. My apologies, sorry.
No worries.
Very good.
I'm assuming that the forestry condition was in respect of the tree in front on the parking pad.
I'd support that motion.
Okay, then that motion is seconded by Mr. Nipfel. So it is moved and seconded to approve without condition. Am I right? No, I'm wrong. I'm wrong.
No, we're moving approval of variances 1 and 2, but refusal of variances 3 to 6.
Thank you very much. And that's the motion which Mr. Nipfel seconded.
That's correct.
And that's the
That's
motion
correct.
that is now before us.
And that, sorry, Mr. Chair, there's no forestry conditions? There's forestry conditions 1 and 2.
The determination that the members have made is that the forestry condition appears to apply to the variances that we have refused. We're going to give
Or,
them,
I guess
If we attached it, it probably wouldn't be a problem.
wouldn't matter. I
doesn't
think
matter.
that's right.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, yeah. I guess it wouldn't hurt if it doesn't apply, then it doesn't apply. But if it does catch, maybe it catches the front porch changes.
so it will be subject to forestry.
Okay.
The
Yes.
motion is subject to forestry. Okay. Now we've got it. So that motion is before us. It is moved and seconded, subject to forestry. Those in favor, please show your hands. And that vote is unanimous to carry the motion and to so approve the application. With that, we come to the final application on today's agenda, which is number 43, 10 Victor Avenue. And this application consists of a severance and 2 related minor variance applications. Let's have the agent join us, please, by stating your name.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Lance Caprillion. Address is 180 Shaw Street, Suite 315.
Thank you very much. Okay. So Lance, this application was deferred from about a month ago, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And that was due to signage.
Yes, we had put up 1 sign instead of the 3, so we had to defer.
Okay. I'm gonna ask you to give us just a brief presentation on your severance and your related minor variance
Mr. Chairman?
applications.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Before we do that, I think there's a problem with our agenda, and I just need the applicant to clarify. I think 43C, the purpose is wrong. 43B and 43C read the same, and in fact, in one of the 2, we're preserving an existing house, and in the other one, we're building a new house. If I'm correct, 43C is the one where we're building a new house, and 43B is the one where we're retaining the house. And before we get everybody confused, I thought maybe the applicant could clarify that.
Very good point, Mr. Nipfel.
Yes, that's correct. 43C relates to the proposed new building, yes.
So we do need to alter the purpose on that application.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I can speak to that briefly. The notice that was sent out to the neighbors for 43C was written as to construct a new 3-story semi-detached dwelling with a front and rear 2nd-story balcony on the conveyed lot described in consent application B0017/21TEY. It was just an error made in preparing the agenda.
So then at this stage, did we not need to do anything by way of altering the purpose?
Well, as I've written, I would change, at least for the agenda and moving forward for the decision, et cetera, and the minutes, that it
So
reflects
the change is
correctly.
made. Okay. Very good. Very good then. Okay then. Agent, if you would go ahead, we'd like just a brief presentation on the thrust of your severance and the related minor variance applications.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
So we've been working on this file for a number of years. We had the good fortune to meet with planning staff pre-pandemic and presented this to them. As you know, the intent here is to create new housing, 2 units, and to do that, we explore different approaches, and we, working with planning, came to the conclusion that the severance was the best way to do that. Subsequent to that, we've also made a number of changes to the proposal with planning's guidance to try to get us to a place where we think we have achieved a good balance between the kind of building that the owners would like to have and the neighborhood and the intent that we all share, that we want to make a better city. So we have a number of variances for the new building. Really our sort of primary intent was to do something that was respectful of the neighborhood and in particular of the historic building, the existing historic building at number 10. So we set the new building back. We kept the height low. The height of the overall building is not a variance. We have variances for the walls. And what we did there was we created dormers in the front and rear so that there would be some second story roof exposed, which is more consistent with the housing stock in the area. It's just that the dormer ended up being a little wider, so we ended up with that variance. The setback variance relates to the relationship to the existing building, and the previous. There's a garage there right now. We're more or less respecting the footprint of the garage, except on the west side, we've pulled the new building back from the lot line, so it's a little bit better than the existing condition. The proposed building has there are 2 units in it. The owners have elderly parents, and so there is the thought that they may need to be closer to them. So we designed this with an elevator, so there could be an accessible building for them, for the parents, and they could be very close to the owners. And that's why we ended up with what we have, which is 2 units that share an elevator. And I think really there are a number of conditions that we understand from planning that we knew about well in advance because we had come to those conclusions together with them. Permeable paving being one that we think is an excellent plan anyway, so we're in total support of that, and we will do what we can to make sure that front yard is a beautiful space on the street.
Thank you very much. Very good. Are there any questions to put to the agent panel? If there are none, then we can move forward to take the application into committee. And let's do that now. Any comments, or we could move right to a motion if can we deal with the 3 items in one vote, Madam Deputy Secretary Treasurer?
The conditions are a little bit different.
Okay.
I mean, you could, but then you have to elaborate conditions for each application.
Well, then why don't we do one application? We'll do the consent first, and then the first minor variance, and we'll do 3 separate votes, panel, because there are some slightly different elements. Mr. Byatt, go ahead, please. You are muted, sir.
Remember that at some point. With regard to number 43A, 10 Victor Avenue, to obtain purpose to obtain consent to sever an existing residential lot into 2. I would like to move approval of the application as is.
Is there a second to that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that would be with the standard consent conditions, and there's also an engineering condition.
Okay to
Thank
add
you.
that? Okay to add that, Mr.
Yes.
Byatt? Yeah, okay. That's
Yes,
okay.
please.
Good, thank you. Please do that. And I see a second from Mr. Clay. So it is moved and seconded to approve the consent application. Those in favor, show of hands, please. Motion carried. The consent is approved. The first variance, which is A0229. Anyone ready for a motion on this application?
Zahir should just keep on going.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Zahir. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm just looking again. So with regard to application 43B, this is 10 Victor Avenue, Part 2.
Right.
I'd like to move that the application be approved. I can't remember if there are any, I think it's a forestry.
Apparently there's
Forestry
nothing.
number 3, I think.
Conditions.
Apparently there's no conditions. I'm just getting that information from the Deputy Secretary Treasurer. So there's no conditions. It's just a straight approval.
Fine. Thank you. In that case, just move an approval of accepting the moving to approve the application as it stands, no conditions attached.
Thank you. I look for a second on that motion, please, and there is one from Mr. Clay. Therefore, moved and seconded to approve. Those in favor, show of hands, please. Mr. Nipfel, very good. That motion is carried and the application is approved. And lastly,
And finally,
43C.
43C, 10 Victor Avenue, Part 1. Once again, I move to approve the application. And again, I'm not quite sure if there were any conditions attached to this portion.
I think there's a planning condition on this one.
Planning condition.
It's in the
forestry.
supplemental, am I correct?
Yes,
Planning-
there's
planning
planning
applies a-
conditions and forestry.
And forestry.
Yep.
Planning and forestry. So with regard to 43C, I move to approve the application with conditions attached from planning and forestry. Forestry, did you say 2?
3.
I think
What-
it's 3.
Forestry 3.
Three.
Forestry 3. Very good. Thank you for that. We'll need a second. I'm looking for a second on that. It is seconded by Mr. Nipfel. So therefore, moved and seconded to approve. Those in favor, show of hands, please. And that motion is carried. The application is so approved. And with that, the panel does complete today's agenda. It's 8:31 p.m. and the agenda is thereby complete. Just before we terminate the hearing, I would like to extend my thanks to the panel members for their, as always, their concentration through till the end on what were some quite complicated items to sift our way through. So I do appreciate that. Mr. Bide, yes.
And just take this opportunity to extend my apologies to you, Mr. Chair, and to my colleagues for my earlier absence, a misunderstanding on my part. I apologize.
You more than made up for it when you returned. No problem at all. I also want to
Mr.
thank.
Chairman, could we also thank the staff as
I'm
well?
just going to thank staff now for
Okay,
their
thanks.
flawless operational support, as always, keeping this going. And I'm always impressed by the amount of preparation that it takes to get us to this stage in terms of lining up and scheduling speakers and putting these applications together. A very good piece of work by all concerned, and with that, the hearing is terminated. Good night to everybody.
Thank you, members.